Hello and welcome to tonight's webinar. This is Hunter Allen and I have got some cool stuff for you guys tonight. Let's see if I can get my screen set up here tonight. We're going to talk about Pmax and we are going to talk about some of our new metrics, functional reserve capacity, and also mFTP. And then I'm going to go through some pretty cool little demos that I have set up for you as well. So we've got lots of fun things to talk about and get rolling tonight. So it should be a lot of fun, and I'm glad that you are here. So welcome aboard. Now, if you have questions along the way, just let me know. Go ahead and stick them in that question box there, and I will answer them. And the first question I have for you actually is, can anybody hear me out there and or see my screen? If you can, would you just say yes in that little question box? And then that way we can get started, because I want to make sure you guys can see what I'm seeing. Sweet. All right, David. Thank Jake. All right, great, Winston. Perfect. All right, got it. All right, good. Thank you. All right, cool deal. I'm glad you guys can hear me. Thank you. All right. Okay, well, let's get started tonight. Understanding Pmax, functional reserve capacity, and mFTP. So here we go. And what we're going to talk a little bit about is, first off, Pmax. Now, one thing that we've talked about for many years, we've always said, hey, there's this best 1 second, right? Your best 1 second we never really talk about and we never look at, because there's so many different things that go take into account to create that best 1 second, and just usually is not good data. So that means, if the sun, the moon, the stars align and you get the perfect sliver of your pedal stroke right when it starts to record the sample and it finishes recording the sample, you could possibly crack out 1,800 watts, and you've never done over 1,100 before in your life. And that's very likely. But you may never ever do it again. Okay, so we've never done best 1 seconds. Best 5 seconds has always been our go-to, because it's a good representative of neuromuscular power, and we've liked that. We still like that. It contains a little bit of fatigue in there. So with some new computing power, with some new algorithms, a little bit of new data coming from some of our power meters, we came up with Pmax. This is the maximum power over at least a full pedal revolution with both legs, so both left and right legs. So it's your best watts, your maximum watts over each one, okay, left and right. So that full pedal revolution really gets rid of a lot of those spikes, and that's a big deal. Now, this is a model-driven metric, so when you see Pmax on the screen, you may look through the file and you can't find that number, right? You're not going to. Okay, we're using a model to create that number, so there is no number in there that is 1,211 watts or whatever. It is what it is. So we're creating that number through what you've done. So, it also has to do with the fact that, this third bullet point here, the critical power model has what's called the infinite time, infinite power issue. So remember, if you look at an XY axis graph and you have this critical power model, well, it's a curve on that line, and if you go on the X side of it, it just goes out forever, saying that you could do a tiny bit of power for an infinite amount of time, okay? Or the other way, you could do a maximum number of power for a very tiny amount of time. Okay, so yeah, not really realistic. And the 5 second really is affected by fatigue, a little bit of fatigue. So doing it for that one pedal revolution is much better in terms of that. So let's look at some standards. Our averages are 1211, our standard deviation, 200 watts, low 900, medium, high. Same thing for ladies over here, 988. Standard deviation is 312, low, medium, and high. So wattage numbers, right? Peak wattage numbers, Pmax. That's what we're looking at. Okay, so why do we come up with this? Again, we talked a little bit about that, a better measurement. We've got some more data. We've got a little more computing power now too. And what are some factors that are involved here? Well, of course, we're trying to measure this increase or decrease in maximal power outputs over your training, right? So we want to see if you're improving or or not improving over all of these things. So that's something that you always are thinking about and looking at. Then what it does is it also determines the maximal rate of FRC. All right, so functional reserve capacity. It gives us that maximal rate. It's the ceiling for the FRC is what that is. And then, you've got also, hey, we're going to implement some race strategies. Nothing new here, just like you have done in the past. You're going to look at some of those things and implement some of those race strategies all the way through. So, you got a good sprint, you got a good Pmax, then we can do something with that. If you don't, then we can do something with that. It's just a matter of choosing the right race and how to strategize appropriately for that. So that's always a good thing. Okay, next thing we've got coming up here is functional reserve capacity. Now we've got a ton of questions on FRC and what is it, what does it mean, what's going on, all that jazz. So let's talk a little bit about that. Let's kind of, hopefully I can make it a little easier to understand, and that way you can figure out kind of what's going on there. It is the total amount of work that can be done during continuous exercise above FTP before fatigue occurs. Okay, so think right now you've got FTP, right? And you look at the power zones, the power levels, everything above that, right? You're used to seeing VO2 max, anaerobic capacity, neuromuscular power, right? We're kind of lumping all of that into one and saying that's your functional reserve capacity. Okay, so all of that is kind of lumped into one. Now, there is components of all those things in there, right? Now, we haven't just like thrown away anaerobic capacity or VO2 max and all that stuff. It's still there, right? So when you first start out, you kind of have a component of both, all right? And then you've got more pure FRC. But the beautiful thing here that Coggin has done is that he's been able to use some of the modeling that we've come up with and some new computing power to really learn more about what this is and then how we can play with this. Now, the thing that's confusing a lot of people is our units. The units are in kilojoules, or joules per kilogram. So a lot of people, we aren't used to seeing that except for, oh, you did a 3,000 kilojoule ride. And so what does that mean? Well, it's a measurement of work, all right? So, but how do I relate that to maybe what you might think of from a, amount of work you can do above your FTP? Well, it's hard to relate that, all right? So let me help you with that a little bit. So first off, let's talk about Formula One cars. All right, so everybody, if you know me, you know that I'm a big Formula One car fan, love watching these guys race. The thing that we're talking about here is, think of, in Formula One now, they have two engines in these cars. They have a normal gas-powered engine, all right, so normally aspirated gas engine. They also have an electrical engine that is what's called a KERS system, a kinetic energy recovery system. This is an electrical engine that can give a little boost if the driver wants a little boost to go down the straightaway, and it's battery powered, and that battery is recharged by the braking forces in the car. All right, so but that's what we're kind of thinking about, right? So first off, your FTP, right? All of the work that you do below FTP, so active recovery, endurance, tempo, sweet spot, all the way up to FTP, that is just like using the maximum horsepower, right? What's 1 horsepower is 746 watts, right? And using that for your FTP, right? That's your gasoline engine, right? So it's funny, right? Even cyclists talk about this, and they'll say, we were going full gas, man, right? Well, what does that mean, right? They had the pedal to the floor. So if you're in a race car, in a Formula One car, you had the pedal to the floor, you were full gas, right? You were at your FTP. You're giving everything you could do. Well, then you also have this little boost, this little electric engine, right? Get an extra 100 horsepower or so, all right? This is something that you could push the button on your steering wheel on your Formula One car, and you get a little boost for a certain period of time, okay, up to 5 or 6 seconds. Not a long period of time, so this gives you that little boost that allows you to go faster down the straightaway, and then that battery recharges at the end. So FRC is a lot like this system, right? You got a battery that recharges, all right, but at the same time, the FRC is really the amount of work you can do when you continuously hold that button down, all right? So it's continuous work above FTP. So, you know, in a Formula One car, that's like 5 seconds, right? But it gives you 100 horsepower and you can pass somebody. Now on a bicycle, you know, we have all of this work we can do above our FTP. It's continuous. All right, now just like this engine, just like this Formula One car, we have that battery that we can recharge, okay? So when we think of it, first think of it as just something that you can completely deplete once, and then that's it, all right? Now after that, you have to recharge that system, okay? So your FRC is the total amount of work you can do when you completely decharge it once, all right? And then, but you can touch it, right? You can hit it for a second, you can hit it for 2 seconds or whatever, and then you've got a little boost. Same thing when we look at this FRC is we can use this little boost. So when we compare this to what's called anaerobic work capacity, all right, so a lot of you may be familiar with that, it's really a measure of work that can be performed utilizing only stored energy sources, okay? So ATP, phosphocreatine, glycogen, and oxygen bound to the myoglobin, all right? So this is really based off of that critical power model. Now, that's fine, and there's certainly nothing wrong with that. It's worked for us for many, many years, but what we've done is we've evolved it, right? This is the work that we can do during continuous exercise, right? So if you're in the Formula One car, you're holding the button down the whole time above FTP before fatigue occurs, okay? This is based off the functional threshold power. So let's look at these things, all right? So what do we have here is we've got some standards. Our range for men is 9 kilojoules to 35 kilojoules, all right? Our range for women is 6.2 to 24.2 kilojoules. Average is 18, average is 13. Standard deviation is around 4 to 5 or so. High for men is over 22.9, for ladies over 17. Medium 13.5, 22. 9.2, 17, and low is less than 13.5 or less than 9.2. These are some standards, okay, so that gives you a little bit of a range of what that is. Okay, so let's kind of break it down a little bit more here, all right? So, oh, well, cool, I could do 20 kilojoules of work. Well, how's that going to help me when I'm out there training, right? Or how am I going to relate that to what I do? All right, so we're working on helping that actually, you know, figure that out. Well, we got to come back to some definitions here. A kilojoule is simply 1,000 joules. Okay, so a kilojoule is 1,000 joules, and a joule is watts per second, right? So when you're doing 400 watts for 5 seconds, you used 2,000 joules or 2 kilojoules. Okay, so bring that back to over here, right? And so we say, okay, gosh, well, what if we have 10 kilojoules, all right? So if we do 10 kilojoules, all right, then we could say, well, if we're doing 10 kilojoules, then that would be roughly, 10,000 joules, okay? And if we converted that back into time, we say, well, that would be 1,000 watts for 10 seconds. Okay, so 1,000 watts for 10 seconds. That would be what we're thinking about. All right, so if you could do 10 kilojoules, it would be 1,000 watts for 10 seconds. Okay, so again, we come back over here. That's at the you know, kind of the lower range here, right? Is 1,000 watts for 10 seconds. Even some of our best 1,000 watts for 10 seconds. Okay, now you can easily do 1,000 watts. Maybe not everybody, but you know, a lot of us, and that might be for 5 seconds. But not for 10 seconds, okay? So keep that in mind as you think about this, right? What you could do, though, is you could half that 1,000, right? You could take that 1,000 and you could half it, and you could say, well, how can I do 1,000 watts for 20 seconds. Well, you could do 500 watts for 20 seconds, and that would still be that same 10 kilojoules, right? 500 watts for 20 seconds. Now that becomes like, oh, I can do that, right? Well, if you did that, then you would exhaust completely that FRC system, okay? 500 watts for 20 seconds. All right, so I'm going to have a little conversion table for you. Don't worry, coming up. So we are going to get that dialed in. All right, let's talk a little bit about the battery. All right, remember how that would, think about how this is, right? It's when the battery's full, right, that Pmax determines kind of the maximal usage or drain, right? And then when that battery is empty, all right, then you got to rest, okay? So every time you empty the battery, you got to recover and come back again, all right? So that's a key thing there to do, all right? So that's the way you are kind of recovering that battery every time you push the button on your electric engine. You go sprinting up a hill, you got to go over the other side to recover some of that. Now it may not always recover all the way, depending on how that how fatigued you are over time, and how all of those components, hydration, everything. You got lots of things going on. So that's part of something we'll talk about, and we'll get to down the road. Okay. All right. So next thing we're going to talk about. Before I go further, when you do rest, you got to do it under FTP. Okay. So in order to recharge that battery, you have to do it under FTP. So again, let's talk about how we empty this. All right, we empty it through a continuous effort above FTP. It's capped by our Pmax. Higher watts are going to be a faster depletion, right? So if you go sprint at 1,000 watts, if you make it to 10 seconds, you're completely depleted that. But you maybe only do 1,000 watts for 5 seconds, right? So, but you still depleted half of that already. Lower watts, but still over FTP, a slower depletion rate, right? So maybe in this case, your FTP is 250 watts, and you do 300 watts, right? And you do it for 45 seconds, right? So you're still depleting FRC. You're above your FTP, but you're doing it at a slower rate. Okay, so that's another one to think about. All right, key factors that FRC uses. All right, so we've got Pmax, right? That's the upper limit of the burn rate. We got our battery size, right? FRC, the amount of kilojoules available to burn through. All right, so that's what we're talking about. Okay, now let's talk about modeled functional threshold power. Okay, so this is the model-derived highest power a rider can maintain in a quasi-steady state without fatiguing. It's not predicted FTP. Okay, so there's been confusion, a little bit of confusion out there. Well, saying that my FTP is 240, but I really think it's 260. Well, it's not predicting that it is. It's just looking at the data that you have and saying, based on what you have done, it is 240. Okay, so it's important to understand that difference. All right, and so if you ride your bike at 200 watts for 3 months every day, at 200 watts, it's going to look and say, oh, your FTP, your modeled FTP is 200 watts, right? Because it thinks that that's what your maximum is. So you have to put in good data, right? Garbage in, garbage out. You got to do good, hard efforts in order to do this. So for a lot of you going into the winter, in the off season, you might not be doing a lot of maximal efforts at FTP. So it's going to show your FTP is going to be lower. I don't want you to get discouraged there, because that is not ultimately, it may or may not be the reality of what it is. But you have to do that effort. All right, it's not a predictor; it's a model. All right, so there's a significant difference. Okay, so let's jump into WKO4 and kind of go through some of these things. All right, so let's jump in here to WKO4. We'll get that out of the way. All right, now what we've got here is, let's talk a little bit about, let me give you just a little tour here. So I know that some of you aren't super familiar, but you've seen it, and otherwise it's all good. So let's talk a little bit about this. So one of the things that that we've got in here is we've got our hero bar up across the top. So I've selected this athlete here. We've got our hero bar. Here's our chronic training load. Here's our acute training load, our training stress balance, our ramp rate. Okay, so those are the key things. Now, you can change these things. Anything in WKO that you hover over and it changes color, that's a clickable area. Okay, so that's a clickable area. So you can click on it. That one's red because I've set an alert. All right, so I say alert me if it's less than 0 or more than 5. Warn me if it's 1 or more than 4. All right, so I really want this ramp rate constant. I want it to be 7. All right, because I want to see what he's doing over the last week. Okay, so over the last week is really where I want to be that. All right, so let's change this to 7. Let's change this to 2, 3, and let's change this to 5. Okay, so now I've got some cool parameter here that says me, okay, what's my ramp rates? And then that way I can figure out, hey, I better watch this. His ramp rate is -1.1. He's losing fitness. Look at his TSB. It's really high. He's getting freshness, but we could be losing fitness right now. So we just need to figure that out. Here is his Pmax. Okay, so 1,018 watts. Here's his FRC, 18 kilojoules. Okay, so what does that mean? 18, right? So you can move the decimal place over 1, add a 0. He could do 1,800 watts for 10 seconds. Okay, so if we could do it, he can't, because look at his Pmax, it's only 1,000 watts. But if he could do 1,800 watts for 10 seconds, and that would exhaust the FRC system. Okay. Now we could divide it in half and say, well, could he do 900 watts for 20 seconds? Probably not. Okay, because remember, again, his Pmax is there. So we can start to kind of play with some of those numbers of how that would kind of come down. All right, so that's his FRC. Here's his modeled FTP, what the software is saying. Here's what I have set his FTP at. So we're within a watt of each other here, which is, you know, I mean, I'm happy if it's within 10 watts. You know, if it's close as 10 watts, then that's good. All right, because that means that, hey, you may know a little bit more about yourself or your athlete if you're coaching them, or the software maybe is giving you a hint. Yeah, you know, maybe you're overestimating a little bit. But within 10 watts, I think that's pretty solid. We've seen a lot of people who've been using WK4 now, and you know, well, my model FTP is 25 watts lower than what I think it is. Well, then when we kind of dig in there, we have them actually go out and do, we had some clients or customers go out and do 20-minute, 60-minute time trials and try and prove it, and they can't, right? So they had what we're referring to as their set FTP was a vanity FTP. That's what they wished their FTP was. So be aware of that. It can be a vanity FTP if you're not too careful. All right, so on the right side, we interact with our time ranges here. So we can click on last 90 days, and it will automatically rebuild this chart. We can go last 30 days, there it is. We can say 2015, then it will build 2015 charts. You can say 2014, it builds your 2014 charts. You can create specific time ranges that you want in here. May 1 to July 31st, January to August, January to April, whatever you want, you can create them. You can push the plus button down here and create your own range. So let's say, gosh, I want to see January 2015 to March 1, 2015. All right, so I can just say 1, March 1. All right, and then you've got it. There are the dates from that to that. Okay, so it's an easy way to create new ranges, compare ranges. You want to compare them to each other. It's very simple. You can just click on one. We'll click on 2015 here, and then we can hold down the command button, click on 2014. They overlay each other on top. All right, so these are now overlaid there, and I can see that we've got some bad data here in 2014 I need to clean up. Down here you can see you know, some of these things are overlaid on top of each other. Okay, so an easy way to kind of play with this information and overlay it. Hit the command button inside that right-hand Explorer. All right, now this is a pack. We have lots of packs in here, and you can see that here is the WK4 Classic Chart Pack, calendar, weekly summary report, monthly summary report, what's happening every month, like the bests and stuff, and for each month. So, you know, you can see those things by month, all right, kilojoules of work, climbing, intensity factor, average effective, the EF, the Joe Friel metric there, the mean maximal power curve, our peaks chart, our bests, our time in zones. I mean, you've got tons of neat charts here that are attached or linked to the upper chart. So we call this the parent in the upper pane, and we call this the child in the lower pane. Now, a lot of people have also asked me, and I know I'm kind of doing a little tour here. I'll get back to our thrust here, but I want to make sure you're all getting some good questions in here and you're seeing it. They've asked me, well, how do I get this bigger? How do I make this bigger? Well, there's a couple of buttons over here in the upper right-hand corner that you can get rid of the left and the right-hand explorers. So you click the left-hand explorer, that goes away. You click the right-hand explorer, that one goes away. You click the one in the middle, that gets rid of the middle one, and now you've got full screen on whatever your upper pane was in there. Okay, so you've got that full screen however you want it. Okay, now you can just push them right here, and then they all come back. All right, now you can also, and I love shortcut keys. I love shortcut keys. So you can use the shortcut keys. So hold down the Option and Command button. So get out your pen and paper there, pencil and paper. Right, Option plus Command button, and use your arrow keypad. All right, just hold the right arrow key down, and that lets the right one go away. The left one goes down, the left one goes away. Put the bottom one, hit the bottom one, and it shows that bottom chart. Hit the top one, it shows the top chart. Okay, so that way you can see both of them. You can bring them back by pushing them all there. You know, that's easy enough. All right, take them away, easy enough. Or you can bring them all back at once by continuing to hold down the Option and Command key and hit the Enter button. And then boom, it just comes right back. You got them all. There they are. They're all back in there. So nice and simple, nice and easy. All right. So you notice over here in the bottom left corner, it's syncing with TrainingPeaks, so it's pulling down, it's going online. I've got it set to sync every hour. So it goes online, looks at any files, has it gotten any new files, looks for those new files, and then pulls down any new ones, confirms, oh, hey, we've got these, we don't have these, etc., and then syncs it in there. So if you're a coach, a super easy way every day. It's just like email, you just get your data every hour. So nice. Don't have to worry about hitting any buttons. It just comes in. You got your best data in there. If you're an athlete, you can sync both ways, pushing up data to TrainingPeaks and pulling down data from TrainingPeaks. So easy way to do that. Okay, so inside here, we've got, again, lots of different charts. And if you don't find the chart you want, you can click on the chart picker button. There's the chart picker button, and you've got tons and tons and tons and tons of charts inside the chart picker. All right, now you'll notice that some of them look like they have layers to them. That's a chart pack. All right, so there's chart pack versus just a chart. Okay, so again, remember a chart pack has children charts that are linked below to the parent chart up here. So some of them are going to be like that. Here's the athlete details. All right, so here's your athlete details in here, where you would change your FTP, where you would change your weight, all these things in here, different power levels and stuff and that. And I'm not going to go through that because that's not the thrust of it tonight, but it's all there. So let's talk about our power duration curve. All right, so here's our power duration curve. One thing that we're using it for, and I'm going to make this full screen for you guys so you can see it easily, is we're looking at it and we're using it comparatively with like the way we used it for the power profile. Now, remember we have the power profile, right? But we have this as well, so now we're looking at a little bit of the same thing, but in these lines, okay? So now you've got world-class, exceptional, excellent, very good, good, moderate, fair, recreational. So here, the yellow dotted line, this is the actual data that the athlete created. The red line is really a line of best fit. You can see it kind of taking the middle line here between these peaks and working its way all the way through. And then that way you can see where it comes. Now you'll notice in some places it's going to be below the actual. Some places it's going to be above the actual. Okay, so that's a great thing because then that typically gives us an idea, especially when it's above the actual, that the athlete has room to grow, right? They have room to grow because if you look at it from a modeling or system point of view, then you'll see that that's really kind of gives us this nice idea about how everybody's looking at it. All right, so that's certainly a big thing there. All right, so definitely a good one. All right, now you can scroll along here. You can see all these different watts per kilogram. What are you looking at when you look at this curve? Well, you're looking at the places it crosses the curve. So this athlete starts out a good, or actually very good up here, right? Starts to cross the curve out here at about 14 seconds. So he's now not really very good. He's down to moderate from 14 seconds all the way to 40 seconds, 37, 40 seconds. And then that is where one of his weaknesses is. Okay, so it's a pretty specific thing, right? And you haven't been able to see this typically because you in the Power Profile Classic, right? So we'll click at this one and you can see it here. So you can see the curve down below. You haven't been able to see this because that 14 seconds out to 40, that's just missing here, right? This is 5 seconds, this is 1 minute. You didn't know that there was anything really happening there at all. And this 1 minute actually kind of looks a little better because this athlete starts to come back at a minute. But it really didn't show this area here where we need some help. All right, so that's one of the things that we use it for as we start to look a little deeper into the athlete. Now again, we'll come back here to the power duration curve. I'll make this one big again. And out here, as we start to come along, you can see that, you know, again, here's some places where it's going to come above, and then here we're going to show, well, gosh, you know, really at 33 minutes or so, you can do 4.7. You just haven't done it maybe in a while. Okay, so that's one way to look at that. And you can see that it starts to cross the line right here again, right? Comes out here at 2 minutes, right? So here we've got, comes out to 40 seconds, and then it's pushing higher and higher and higher and higher. And it keeps pushing all the way back out here to that excellent line, right? So there's the excellent line, the third one down. There's the excellent line. All right, and then that one you can see right there. He's all right at excellent all the way out to this area. Okay, so again, where it crosses can give you some insight into that. Now, let's look at the PD curve metrics. Okay, so this is just kind of, we'll look at a little bit of the actual metrics here. I'll move this a little bit smaller here, and we can look at that as that builds. All right, and then we'll look at the PD curve history as well. So let's actually look at that history chart first, because that one is one that we'll look at, and then we'll take that next. Let's look at this one. All right, so here we have all of 2015, and you can see that his Pmax was, our FRC was really high out here in January. All right, now his Pmax is you know, kind of stable here, you know, pretty stable all the way through this, doesn't change much, but his FRC has really changed. Okay, so he's out here when his modeled FTP, remember model is going to be in orange, all right, was relatively low at 257. You can see 257 right there. All right, FRC was really high, all right, but then he started to train, and he got more and more fatigued, and you can see that, well, gosh, his FTP came up, FTP comes up, FTP comes up, and at the same time, this is some fatigue, right? But then he starts to give a little more freshness, right? Starts to rest, and this period of time here in July, the beginning of July, he had both his highest FTP, and he starts to gain some fairly decent FRC at the same time. Okay. Now, you'll notice here he starts to lose fitness around the 10th of July, and he starts to lose that fitness, but then that freshness gives him more FRC. Okay, so that's really where we're kind of thinking about how we look at this. This changes in square wave patterns, all right? So just like your FTP doesn't just linearly move up. Okay, today I get 1 more watt. Tomorrow I get another watt. All right, so the next day I get another watt. It just doesn't increase watt by watt. That's not the way it works. It increases, you know, in these kind of square wave patterns. All right, so that's really what we're looking at when we think about these things. All right, so now let's go here. We'll hit that PD curve metric 1 again. We'll let that calculate a little bit. While we're letting that calculate, and remember, you know, these are some of the most difficult ones to calculate. It takes some time, but once you've hit them and you've calculated them, they're going to be fast after that because we're caching a lot of that data, and then that way you don't have to worry too much about that the next time. Now, if you'll notice over here on the left side, in the left-hand Explorer, my athletes have phenotyping. All right, so these are the phenotypes for them: time trialer, all-arounder, sprinter, okay, T-tier, right, time trialer, all-around. I don't think I have any pursuiters right now. But everybody's got a little bit of a different phenotype. All right, there's pursuiters, the next one. Now, time trialer is a little bit of a misnomer. It's really a steady state athlete. It's somebody who does a steady state ride. It is you know, something that allows, you know, you to go hard, stay going, you know, at a very high level. It, you know, has stage race, you know, you recover quickly from stage races and stuff like that. So that's really a steady stater. So we're using the shape of this curve, just like Dr. Coggin and I wrote in our second edition and first edition. The shape of the curve has a lot to do with the type of rider that you are. Okay, and so we're using that to help figure out what your phenotype is. All right, so let me show you this one down here. So here we see that now this one has created the same line without all the other lines in here, and it shows you the modeled FTP, it shows you the FRC, it shows you the Pmax. Okay, here's the Pmax. All right, now you got to make sure you remember what you're looking at, right? So you're looking at this, but well, I really want the last 30 days, right? And you can see then that changes over here. If you're like, wait a minute, these numbers don't match up with these numbers, well, that's because you're looking at a different time period, okay? So you can click on these things and you get different time periods for each time. All right, so you got to remember that that's going to be how you interact with this. This is going to be your last 30 days or out to 90 days right there, okay? So that's going to be where that is. It's really the last 90 days, all right? So in this case, it's about basically the same, 30 days to 90 days, all right? So don't get confused by that if you're looking at it. Why is this not the same? I don't understand it. Oh, yeah, that's right. I got to interact with my data over here, my time ranges over here. We looked at the PD metrics chart. Now, here is a great one that I really have enjoyed playing with. This is the modeled FTP versus CTL and TSB. Okay, so this one, let's talk about this one. On our x-axis down here, we've got watts. On our y-axis, we've got CTL, all right, TSS per day, CTL. This is the modeled FTP, all right, out here. All right, so these blue dots are the model FTP. When it says, oh, look, when this athlete has got a CTL of 120 or something right here, and let me track with cursor. So I can click on this thing up here. I'll just say track with cursor. All right, then it lets me track those points. All right, so now I can track the points. When I'm up here at 124, it doesn't necessarily mean that my FTP is going to be the same, right? So I've got some, you know, places here where I don't have that, right? So, hey, look, some of these things over here, I have an FTP of 315 and my CTL is actually 97. But so it doesn't always mean that the highest CTL is going to also be your best FTP, right? So you can kind of think about it from a couple of different perspectives. One, it doesn't mean that, okay, if you have a really high CTL, you know, you may just be really fatigued at that period of time, right? You can imagine a CTL for an athlete in the Tour de France, you know, they're going to be really fatigued at the end of the Tour de France. Their CTL will be really high, but their FTP may have definitely gone down from all that hard racing from 21 days. So it's not going to always equate more is better. If you'll notice over here in these blue points right here, these are the top 10 of the bests for FTP for this athlete. Okay, so he's got his 10 best are these green points right here. All right, and there's two of them right here. And you can notice that they're actually happening over here where his CTL's in the 90s. Okay, so he's got some 90 range. Now, come down here, we've got our TSBs. All right, so he's got some TSBs here that are very positive. And I'm going to track the TSB, track with cursor there. We've got some that are 43, and he's got 310. He's got some down here 23, 323. He's got some down here that are 323 and negative 24. But his bests are over here, right? 366. Here's a one at 9, positive 9. The same one at positive 11. Here's one at 1. Here's one at 0 or 3. There's one there at 6. You can see that negative 13. So the best efforts that he's done for the year have all happened in that range. Okay, so again, not super high, all right, over here. Don't ignore these. These are bad data points. And not super low, okay, where he's really fatigued. You can see that some of his most fatigued was actually showing that his modeled FTP is way low at 220 when he was very fatigued. You know, it's like, oh man, he was really, really crushed at that point. Okay, so that's something that is a great correlation to show how you are related to your training load and to your FTP. I love that one. That's a great one. I'm sure you'll enjoy that one. All right, so we looked a little bit at some of these things. Let's look at our Power Profile Classic. All right, so we've got our Classic one. I'm going to get rid of this left pane here to give you a little more room here. Another one that is new is this one. This is the Power Duration Curve Profile, Strengths and Weaknesses. All right, now this is essentially the same thing as the Power Profile, but it's across all durations now. Okay, so again, here's 5 seconds, 1 minute, 5 minutes, FTP, but what we're looking at is now we're looking at all durations. So again, you're seeing, just like what we were talking about earlier in the power duration, where it crossed those lines. So if I click over here, where it crossed those lines at 12 seconds out to 40 seconds, that's a weakness. Well, it surely is, and you can see it in that strengths and weakness. Here it is. You can see that curve really coming out all the way out to 40 seconds or so. It's dropping down. Those are clearly limiters for him. All right, but then it starts to rise up. All right, it starts to get better. It gets to his average line, and then they start to become strengths all the way to 5 minutes, and then levels all the way out to an hour. Okay, so everybody's going to have a little different one. All right, but start to look at these areas that are, again, weaknesses that just aren't shown by having only 4 parameters here: 5 seconds, 1 minute, 5 minutes, FTP. It's just not quite enough data to give us the whole picture all the time. So, it's still a great way to look at it. It just is better to have more. All right, more data is better. More data is better. All right, so that's really kind of what we're talking about from this perspective of how these things we look at them. Let me show you one more here. we've got some FRC burn rates. Okay, so this is something that we've been playing with. All right, I'm just playing with this. I don't think I quite have all the expressions correctly done here, but I've been playing with it, so I want to show you guys what this is. So here, if you go along this shows you the time to exhaustion of Pmax. All right, so there's time to exhaustion of Pmax watts, 12 seconds for this right here. Okay, this shows us the total watts available above FTP. All right, let's click on the last 90 days here. Actually, total watts above FTP, 18,000. All right, so this shows us time to exhaustion, 18 seconds. FRC is 18 kilojoules. All right, so there you go, 1,000 watts. Because right, it's 18 seconds because why? He's got 18 kilojoules, right? And he does 1,000 watts, so it's 18 seconds. Okay, so that's where he's looking at it. Okay, he can do 1,000 watts for 18 seconds, or you can do 1,800 watts for 10 seconds. Right? Same thing, right? That's how he can do it. Okay. So then we look at it from this mFTP range. There's where his FTP range is. Here is kind of some burn rates here. So if he did as a percentage of Pmax, right? So if he went right at his Pmax, he would have right around 18 seconds, 7.7. Did 80% of his Pmax, 22 seconds. 60% of his Pmax, 29 seconds. Now, 40%, yeah, this is where I think my math isn't breaking out here. He can definitely do more than that for 40 seconds. All right, so he can easily do that. So don't take that one yet. That's not dialed in. Now here's the same thing for FTP. We can do right here time to exhaustion at mFTP, 56 minutes. Okay, here is 110%, 52 minutes. Here is 130%. 44 minutes. Again, it's like, probably not going to happen here. Okay, so this is where, again, we got a little math we got to work on, and so kind of scale some of these things. So I'm working on that. We'll get that to you as soon as we can. Okay, that's the start of a lot of these new metrics that we've come up with, new analytics, power curve, power duration curve, and some of our strengths and weaknesses, and FRC and burn rate and all kinds of things like that. So I think that you'll really enjoy that. I think you'll really enjoy that. So before I start questions, I just got to show you this, and because I have we've just started working on this, and I think that you'll really enjoy it. We've just done this and literally have not told anybody that we have done this. So you guys are going to be the first to know. Andy and I have been working on this to come up with an altitude corrected score, right, or altitude corrected power. So in this example, this is a race that this client did, and he started. You can see the elevation here, 10,000 feet. Right, he started at 10,000 feet, went up to 12,000 feet, right, and then came down all the way to 5,000 feet. Okay, so clearly his FTP is very different at sea level than it is at 12,000 feet or even 5,000 feet. So we've been working really hard on coming up with a way to correct the power for this. Okay, so we've been able to figure that out. Did some crazy math here and some incredible exercise science that Dr. Coggin has come up with in order to create this. So now what we've got here, you can see here's the elevation. Okay, here's the elevation. Here is the heart rate in this this kind of orange or peach colored. I need to kind of change the colors. I mean, this is literally I finished like 5 minutes before I started the webinar, so I got to mess with some of the colors here. This is the actual power. His yellow line here is the actual power, and then this is the sea level equivalent power. This kind of darker maroon red here. Okay, so that's the sea level equivalent power. So you'll notice, right, then think about this, and I'll make this full screen, that I'm just going to chew on it a little bit. There you go. That you can see that when he starts to go up in elevation, right, his power is coming down, power coming down. Well, guess what? His sea level corrected power is coming up, right? Just like it should. You would think it would be. Same thing here. He goes back down and then comes back up, and now look at his power really coming down even farther than it is for this, all right? And then you can see that his corrected is coming up as well, all right? So right in there, you can see where his corrected power is versus his actual. So look up top up there. It says here's the sea level equivalent power. There's the actual power. So his actual power is 190 watts, but it really was like 232 watts at sea level. All right, you can see a little bit about the heart rate there as well. You can see here, if we look all the way across over here, you can see that average power for the ride, 127 watts, average sea level equivalent power, 147 watts in there. Okay, so actually 20 watts higher than had if he'd have been at sea level. All right, bring that all back. This is the bottom one here. This is the we've taken the elevation adjusted or elevation corrected power in blue, and that then in gray is the power to heart rate relationship here, what the ratio of power to heart rate is inside of that. Okay, so you can see kind of how that ratio is when we look through this of what's the power to heart rate relationship in when you go to elevation. Okay, so again, you know, I literally finished this 5 minutes before Dr. Coggin and I were on a conference call working this out, figuring all these things out. So I've got to figure out some color schemes here. It's kind of looking a little funky, but I'll work on some of those things before we get these things live and put them in the chart exchange, because we don't have them in the chart exchange yet. And remember, the chart exchange is right here. You just click on the chart exchange, and what it does is it goes over to the chart exchange on TrainingPeaks.com. There's the chart exchange, and then there are all these different charts inside here, and then all you have to do is just click the button and say install, and it installs that chart right into your software. So very easy to do, very simple to do, is just bring that chart exchange over. So I'll get this up on the chart exchange most likely on next week, Monday or Tuesday. Maybe can get it up there tomorrow, but I'm not exactly sure, so we'll see how it goes. All right. So that's what we've got going on, and I hope you guys have enjoyed that. And I'm going to start taking questions. So if you got some questions over there, I will start answering them, and we will go from there. Get that up. There we go. Okay, question. Why does one read fair and the other very good? Well, I'm not exactly sure what you're saying there. We got fair here. Last 90 days. Yeah, I'm not exactly sure. Maybe you're thinking of when you change the time range, and you got the different time ranges in here, and that may be what you're thinking about. Okay, so if not, let me know. In the PD histograph, there's a 90 next to the mFTP and FRC. What does that mean? That means that we're looking at 90 days. Okay, so we're using the 90 days inside that. So when you come in here and you click on the configure button and you go into this, we've got the 90 days in here. So this is the actual expression that builds that line. So what we're doing is we're graphing power. We're taking the best power and we're getting the FRC of it over 90 days. If you wanted to change that, you could change it to 42 days for 6 weeks, or 21 days if you wanted to look at it, but the default is 90 days. Is that what that is? And that's what these are all built on in 90 days. And that's, in Coggin, that there's a lot of exercise physiology behind that Dr. Coggin has talked about and said, hey, these things change over 90-day periods. Okay. Once you detect weaknesses, then you address all of them. So the workouts or not weaknesses are important. If you center on strengths. Great question, Claudia. So this is a bit of the coaching aspect that you have to kind of consider sometimes. You have to remember